and welcome to the second part of Treasure Island. I'm continuing. In one way, indeed, he bade fair to ruin us, for he kept on staying week after week, and at last month after month, so that all the money had been long exhausted, and still my father never plucked up the heart to insist on having more. If ever he mentioned it, the captain blew through his nose so loudly that you might say he roared, and stared my poor father out of the room. I have seen him wringing his hands after such a rebuff, and I am sure the annoyance and the terror he lived in must have greatly hastened his early and unhappy death. All the time he lived with us, the captain made no change whatever in his dress, but to buy some stockings from a hawker. One of the cocks of his hat having fallen down, he let it hang from that day forth, though it was a great annoyance when it blew. I remember the appearance of his coat, which he patched himself upstairs in his room, and which, before the end, was nothing but patches. He never wrote or received a letter, and he never spoke with any but the neighbors, and with these, for the most part, only when drunk on rum. The great sea chest none of us had ever seen open. He was only once crossed, and that was towards the end, when my poor father was far gone in a decline that took him off. Dr. Livesey came late one afternoon to see the patient, took a bit of dinner from my mother, and went into the parlor to smoke a pipe until his horse should come down from the hamlet, for we had no stabling at the old Benbow. I followed him in, and I remember observing the contrast, the neat, bright doctor, with his powder as white as snow, and his bright black eyes and pleasant manners, made with the cultish country folk, and above all with that filthy, heavy, bleared scarecrow of a pirate of ours, sitting far gone in rum, with his arms on the table. Suddenly, he, the captain that is, began to pipe out his external song. 50 men on the dead men's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest, yo-yo-ho, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. At first, I had supposed the dead man's chest to be that identical big box of his upstairs in the front room, and the thought had been mingled in my nightmares with that of the one-legged sea-faring man. But by this time we had all long ceased to pay any particular notice to the song. It was new, that night, to nobody but Dr. Livesey, and on him I observed it did not produce an agreeable effect, for he looked up for a moment quite angrily before he went on with his talk to old Taylor, the gardener, on a new cure for the rheumatics. In the meantime, the captain gradually brightened up at his own music, and at last flapped his hand upon the table before him in a way we all knew to mean silence. The voices stopped at once, all but Dr. Livesey. He went on as before, speaking clear and kind, and drawing briskly at his pipe between every word or two. The captain glared at him for a while, flapped his hands again, glared still harder, and at last broke out with the villainous low oath. "Silence! There, between decks!" "Were you addressing me, sir?" says the doctor. And when the ruffian had told him, with another oath, that this was so, "I have only one thing to say to you, sir," replies the doctor, "that if you keep on drinking rum, the world will soon be quit of a very dirty scoundrel." The old fellow's fury was awful. He sprang to his feet, drew and opened a sailor's clasp knife, and balancing it open on the palm of his hand, threatened to pin the doctor to the wall. The doctor never so much as moved. He spoke to him as before, over his shoulder, in the same tone of voice. rather high so that all the room might hear, but perfectly calm and steady. If you do not put the knife this instant in your pocket, I promise upon my honor you shall hang at the next assizes. Then followed a battle of looks between them, but the captain soon knuckled under, put up his weapon, and resumed his seat, grumbling like a beaten dog. And now, sir, continued the doctor, since I know now there's such a fellow in my district, you may count I'll have an eye upon you day and night. I am not a doctor only, I am a magistrate, and if I catch a breath of complaint against you, if it's only for a piece of incivility like tonight's, I'll take effectual means to have you hunted down and rooted out of this. Let that suffice. Soon after, Dr. Livesey's horse came to the door, and he rode away, but the captain held his peace that evening, and for many evenings to come. So we're going to work on chapter 2, beginning it. The name of the chapter is called Black Dog Appears and Disappears. It was not very long after this that three occurred, the first of the mysterious events that rid us at last of the captain, though not, as you will see, of his affairs. It was a bitter cold winter, with long, hard frost, and heavy gales, and it was plain from the first that my poor father was little likely to see the spring. He sank daily, and my mother and I had all the inn upon our hands, and were kept busy enough without paying much regard to our unpleasant guest. It was one January morning, very early, a pinching, frosty morning, the cove of all grey, with hoar frost, the ripple lapping softly on the stones, the sun still low, and the only touching the hilltops and shining far to seaward. The captain had risen early than usual, and set out down the beach, his cutlass swinging on the board skirts of the old blue coat, his brass telescope under his arm, his hat tilted back upon his head. I remember his breath hanging like smoke in his wake as he strode off, and the last sound I heard of him as he turned the big rock was a loud snort of indignation, as though his mind was still running upon Dr. Livesey. Well, mother was upstairs with father, and I was laying the breakfast table against the captain's return, when the parlor door opened, and a man stepped in on whom I had never set my eyes before. He was pale, tallowy creature, wanting 2 fingers on the left hand, and though he wore a cutlass, he did not look much like a fighter. I had always my eye open for seafaring men, with 1 leg or 2, and I remember this one puzzled me. He was not sailoring, and yet he had a smack of the sea about him too. I asked him what was for his service, and he said he would take rum, but as I was going out of the room to fetch it, he sat down upon a table, and motioned me to draw near. I paused where I was, with my napkin in my hand. "Come here, sonny," says he. "Come nearer here." So I'm going to leave it off on that note. If you feel free to comment down the box below on the YouTube if you watch this channel and enjoy it. If you have any criticism or some feedback, I welcome it. I'm just reading this. I like reading classic literature, so I will continue reading this. I hope you look at number 3. Thank you so much.